when you're able to kind of shift in between worlds, because you see how people treat you when they don't think you have a disability, and then you see how people treat you once they do find out, which like in person, I can't really hide it completely, but like there are ways, you know, to make it less noticeable. And that I think like haunted me growing up, seeing like the different way that people would treat me. And I was like, oh my God, maybe the content I've been watching my whole life that doesn't include us made me feel like I don't belong here, you know, and it's all intertwined. And that just gave me this like fire to start creating things that include us, because me seeing a little girl goes, oh my God, she's going to grow up in a world where she doesn't see anyone like her. And I'm like, maybe I should be that person to start putting myself out there on my social media and really just like, so it's like they're all over the place in tone, but I just like showing like the diversity of our world and disability. It doesn't, you know, and there's a lot of things that I can't do. I have a hard time opening bottles. I have a hard time holding a camera for
you're married now, so like, you're good now.
Yeah, he opens everything and holds all the cameras. It's going to benefit everyone. You know, if something happens or someone is feeling uncomfortable, or maybe they have an invisible disability that we don't know about, if I'm making it a priority to show that I need certain things, or that the room is open for those things to be asked about or requested, then that's just making the set more safe for everyone. And, you know, people who have come before us, like we're all, you know, younger and fighting for inclusion, but it's like there have been people who have been fighting for inclusion for like 40 years, you know, and it's just finally somehow people are listening. Yeah, it's pushed me to be like even a better filmmaker, because I'm like, so often people with disability, people make these films that aren't good, and then they clap and they're like, they did such an amazing job and you get an award, like even when they weren't good. And I'm like, I don't want to be that. I don't want it to be like they gave me this because they feel like they should. I want to earn it because I'm actually have some type of talent or skill, and I can be compared to the other filmmakers. Confident with showing it on social media yet, but I was really confident in interviews being like, I have a disability, you know, maybe every so often I'll have a surgery.
Do you do like jazz hands all the times?
Yeah. Yeah. And the way that we show actors on screen, non-disabled actors playing disabled people, they never thought this could even be a path for them. So we at some point have to say no more. We're not going to make this film until we find the right person. If that's in 10 years, if that's in 20 years, so be it. I say this thing where I'm like, it's never been a better time in history to be a female filmmaker and a filmmaker with a disability, because...
Lights, camera, action. Take number 4. Hello, welcome to my podcast, to Mike One Joe Stooch. I am Joe Stooch, and I'll be giving a mic to Ashley Eakins. She's a huge writer, producer, and advocate. You can see her latest work called Forgive Us, For Our Trespasses. It is currently streaming on that Netflix account that you are definitely not paying for. How are you in front of the camera where you spend most of the time behind it?
You know, it's been a long journey of combating internalized ableism. So my disability is physical. It affects my whole body. And for a long time, I did not want to be in front of the camera, and I wanted to hide. I would hide in pictures. I would like try to make my body a certain way so it would look less disabled. And, you know, in 2017, I participated in a Soul Pancake video that I talked about a lot of these things, and I was really vulnerable about how I wouldn't like to put myself on social media, and the small, you know, microaggressions and things that have been said to me have across the years really made me kind of go into this shell of myself. And so being in front of the camera was terrifying. I hated it, but as I was kind of growing with my career and knowing that I wanted to be a director, I would always watch my boss, who at the time was the filmmaker John Chu. He would always do these interviews and talk about his films and talk about, you know, his experience. And I was like, oh no, if I want a successful career, I'm gonna have to be able to talk to people in front of camera. And so I did the Soul Pancake video half like to work those muscles of being in front of the camera. And then the other one was just to get more vulnerable and comfortable with myself. You know, the video ended up dropping, you know, December 2017, and it instantly went viral. It now has, I think my husband said the last time he checked on Facebook, it has like 60 million views, which changed my life because a ton of people reached out to me and made me realize that there's so many people in the world who feel these feelings of like wanting to hide certain parts of themselves. And I realized it's still a work in progress. I'm not 100% always comfortable with my body and being in front of the camera, but I am better at it. And I know now, working actually on stories about disability, it's almost, if anyone's going to judge me, it's like I'm making a story about disability. So it's all wrapped in one, and it's kind of give me this freedom to be more comfortable on camera. I definitely don't want to be an actor, but, doing interviews and stuff I can do. So,
being on that Soul Pancake video is a pretty huge step for you. Mm-hmm. Like you did unveiled everything in one shot.
I did. And it was really years of, growing. And, I found a Facebook group with people who have my rare bone disease. It's called Ollier's disease and Malfucci syndrome. They're linked, kind of two different things, but I have had both, or it's kind of complicated how they connect. I started finding people who looked like me on a Facebook group where I'd never seen anyone in my entire life who had a similar body, or I could even speak to, that had a similar experience. Like, my disability is so specific where it's like very visible and affects every single person who has the bone disease differently. But I don't, and I've had 30 surgeries, I've had ovarian cancer, but I don't use any mobility aids, or I don't, I can walk around pretty well. I can do most stuff on my own. So I'm like, do I have a disability? Do I not? Am I like, is this, I could do a lot of like passing, it felt, which almost sometimes give you more of a complex when you're able to kind of shift in between worlds, because you see how people treat you when they don't think you have a disability, and then you see how people treat you once they do find out, which like in person, I can't really hide it completely, but like there are ways, to make it less noticeable. And that I think like haunted me growing up, seeing like the different way that people would treat me. And so that's why I guess I learned to hide all those years, is because it made it easier. It made it easier for me to go to the grocery store in pants and long sleeves and not have people be like shocked and like, every single person looking at me and it causing this like event. So I think I just like fell into that routine of really covering up and like hiding myself. And, I there's a great quote, and I don't know who it's by, but she says something like, I've never met a strong woman who one day, or like every strong woman has had one day where they are just sick of their own bullshit. And I think that's what happened to me, is like, I think I was like, I'm so annoyed that I'm so insecure, and I was like, that bubbling up, and then finding this group and seeing younger kids who have my disease. And like, I was traveling across the world, working on huge budget movies. Like, I was doing really cool shit, but I'm like, no one knows that I'm doing it in this like disabled body because I'm hiding it all over the internet, And so I realized like, the people who meet me in person know I have a disability. It's like very obvious the minute you meet me, and it's like, that is something that I was like, why am I hiding to the Facebook world or the Instagram world, but not to people in real life, and that was kind of eye-opening. And with Crazy Rich Asians, that film opened so many people's eyes, and my boss is getting these letters of like, I've never seen myself represented on screen. I've always felt ashamed, or, like all these different feelings. And I was like, that's so similar to disability. And I was like, oh my God, maybe the content I've been watching my whole life that doesn't include us made me feel like I don't belong here, and it's all intertwined. And that just gave me this like fire to start creating things that include us, because me seeing a little girl goes, oh my God, she's going to grow up in a world where she doesn't see anyone like her. And I'm like, maybe I should be that person, to start putting myself out there on my social media and really just like showing you can have a full life, and like you can have a disability and also be all these other positive attributes. It's not like despite it, and that's kind of what landed me into doing that Soul Pancake video. And actually how I met my husband.
I want to stop you there because you're jumping on so many different topics I do want to talk about. So I like to separate it. No, it's okay. Yeah. So like first what do you like to call yourself? Like a filmmaker, a disability filmmaker, advocate, or just Ashley Badass Eakins?
I mean, how about all the above? I mostly just go by like writer director because I do say like I'm a writer director with a disability. I'm a disabled writer director. I like people knowing that about me because I think it brings something to the table with storytelling that is interesting and can bring a new perspective. But I think filmmaker. I go by all of them. I think they all work for me. And, for a long time, I didn't want to be called disabled. But then, probably 2019, I started realizing, like, why do I have this word have such a power over me?
I think I can pinpoint when you started becoming confident in yourself. So you have a video where you're saying that you're being interviewed for America's Next Top Model. Not being a model, but like I think a writer of some kind. And then you just said like when you did interviews, you wouldn't really talk about your disability at all. You just like answer questions, whatever. And then I guess for some reason you decided like, hey, I'm gonna talk about my disability and such. And I feel like that's kind of the first moment where you became confident with yourself. And then now I think that was propel you to where you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely would like really shy away from it. And I mean, even growing up, if someone would ask me about my disability or say like, what happened to you? I would start crying. I couldn't even like discuss it in any way because I just wanted people to pretend it didn't exist because I was pretending it didn't exist. So, once I made that shift of like, really what opened my eyes is like meeting a ton of other disabled people and realizing how dope the community is and like my preconceived notions about our community were wrong, and like really caring and like falling in love with this community made me find value and worth in myself as a disabled woman. It's like really interesting how it works like that. But yeah, I will take all the ways you can, identify who I am.
No, of course. So let's start growing up. So I have here you had ovarian cancer twice, plus needing 28 surgery, dealing with Ollier's disease and Malfucci's syndrome, which is benign tumors of cartilage all over the body and limb differences. I know you like to hide your hands since it was really easy in the winter since you can just wear gloves. Did you see yourself as a disabled person or just regular Ashley wanting to learn how to film and write?
Do you mean, so growing up, like, did I see myself as a disabled person? No,
Yeah.
I mean, I tried to compartmentalize that part of my life a lot and not identify with my disability. And I felt like I lived these two lives. Like, I would have these surgeries and doctor's appointments where I'm like, it's so weird that I have this and then I have my friends at school, and the two like didn't intersect much. I mean, if I had a surgery and I was in a cast or had, I've had two leg lengthenings because my legs were two different sizes. And to walk, I used to have a really big limp, and then they like grew one of them to match the other one. And that's like, it's a surgery called an Alizarov limb lengthening. And a lot of people with our bone disease have it because it affects one side of your body more than the other. And so, it was something that I like, it's almost, I adopted cognitive dissonance, which is a word that I really love because it's like you put it in your brain and then shove it to the very back, almost pretending it doesn't exist. And that's how I would live, and I always loved stories. I was very sensitive. I was very like captivated by storytelling. And, I used to read 17 magazine I would get every month. And I would read the stories in there. And that's what got me wanting to pursue journalism, is because I was like, oh, these stories are so interesting. I'm getting to know someone, and it's shifting the way you felt about something by getting to know a personal story. So that's what I really wanted to pursue, which I didn't realize later is like, I love doc, but I'm like, I also like, artistic expression of films. And so that's where it kind of transitioned into film. Growing up, I didn't even know I wanted to be a filmmaker. I would be the one holding the camera, and when we make movies as kids, I'd be like directing everyone and telling them what to do, but I didn't connect the two. And I think because Hollywood felt so distant for me, I lived in Nebraska, I was like, no one looks like me. There weren't even any female filmmakers really at the time that were really, in front of me that I could know about. There's been a lot now that I'm like, in history, they just weren't being highlighted. But yeah, the film thing didn't come until like way later.
Are you attracted more toward female filmmakers or disability people?
Funny enough, I actually like a lot of male filmmakers. There are a lot
Hmm.
of female filmmakers I do like and I think are awesome and badass and make great films. But I, until recently, I'm like, my favorite filmmakers are all men, which you're like, maybe it's because they've been given the opportunity and the chance to do stuff and there's more of them. So maybe that's why it kind of leans that way. But there's definitely female filmmakers I love. And, as far as disabled filmmakers, I'm just getting to like meet people that are filmmakers. There's not like a ton of other filmmakers. There's Jenny Gold, who is in the DGA. I'm in the DGA. I'm one of 7 people in the DGA that identify as disabled, and like out of thousands of directors. So there's not very many of us. And, Jenny Gold did a documentary about the representation of disabled people in film, which like was really cool and interesting. And then, I'm starting to get to know some other filmmakers who are up and coming, kind of in the same realm as me. And they're really interesting. And I love watching their stories as well. There's a guy named Andrew Reed that I think is really smart and really just does cool work. There's a girl named Shayna Garaya who I like love her work. She went to USC. She's a director. She's a wheelchair user. And she made this film called Wheelchair Barbie, which is like hilarious and literally with dolls like playing. She like puts voices to Barbie dolls like playing. And then there's Wheelchair Barbie who comes in and they like, it's hilarious. I think it's on YouTube. You should look it up. But she's someone who, she's made a couple of shorts, but I'm like, I can't wait to see when someone gives her the budget to make a feature. Like that's really, because a lot of this stuff we're all making like on our own, and like, I can't wait for people to get the resources to make bigger things.
Yeah, you have like a double whammy going against you. It's one being disabled and two being a woman, and like you're killing it. I think in the past just 20 years, there's been a huge boom of especially women directors, and then now disability people being able to direct.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, there's another girl who, Kashmir, I think her last name's Jasmine. She just got selected by Disney's. Every year they do kind of what they did with Netflix, where they select a couple filmmakers to make shorts and give them bigger, better budgets. And she was selected to do that, which is really, really cool. Just I'm wondering where it's going to go, and how she's going to, tell stories. And some disabled filmmakers that I know, like, don't even tell stories about disability. And that's cool too. Like, I'm in this place where I realize how much representation affected me growing up and the lack of it. And I'm like, that's all I want to make right now, is like something that is speaking to what I wish I would have seen growing up, or that can bring the community together and bring new perspectives to the world about our communities, and bring up like issues that like I'm learning about, how expensive certain medical aids are. And I'm like appalled by it. And I'm like, why aren't we like, everyone's, and there's so many people yelling about this, but no one's been like listening, and that's what like motivates me with storytelling. Like I like things to have like a purpose, and that's like what drives me when I tell stories.
Yeah, like it's just weird because like we're both disabled in very different ways, but we also have so different experiences with like the way we interact with people that like we have two totally different styles of how to present something. And like, and then like,
What's your style?
I guess I don't have a style yet. I'm more of like the dark humor kind of type, but the thing like I'm going for is that like the disability world is a brand new world that had never been explored before.
Yeah.
So like you have all these brand new story, different, because people are attracted to differences, and like you're just you starting like I don't know like the history, but like you're starting the whole new world of disability people, and that's just a great. You have so much to play with. Like you don't have that much competition, and then the other thing that you're disabled already, so more people are wanting to work with you that are disabled versus someone that had no idea what a wheelchair is. Like you're like I've been doing podcasting for 6 months, and every single guest that it blows my mind how they're living and different expenses and different experiences. Like mind-blowing that like you think your life was rough, but like so many others have it rough, but it's all so different that the stories are endless.
Totally. And that's something that, even my agents and my managers, like my team that helps me get jobs and like manage stuff, is like, you don't always have to tell stories about disability. But I'm like, there's so many stories to tell. Like, it does not mean a certain type of person has a disability. I'm like, it doesn't discriminate against any type of community. It's like it can happen to anyone, or anyone can be born with a disability. And it's like, there's so many different specificities within the world to explore, and maybe down the road I won't do certain things that have, a focus on disability, but I'm going to try and get actors with disabilities in there. I mean, why can't we cast someone in 13 Reasons Why that has a disability, or in Euphoria or one of those shows? Like, why? Let's have one of those characters have some type of disability, and we can, have that be a part of the storyline in some way.
Yeah, I want to get into that more, but I did want to educate the audience so people may think Ashley just got lucky with the Netflix. And I might go to her resume on how she got here because Netflix is no easy feat. So here we go. Ashley wrote in the writer's office for NBC scripted drama The Night Shift and 10 by 10 Entertainment for America's Next Top Model. Then all of a sudden you started traveling. I see you went to the Italian Alps to work on a Quibi series called Survive. Then 5 months in Malaysia and Singapore working on Crazy Rich Asians. I don't think you were sightseeing much because you took all the lessons and skills you learned and started creating your own short films. We got Roommates, Single, Blue, The Details, Cancer for College, and Julia. You have gotten tons of awards and appeared in hundreds of festivals that we really could go forever with this. So let's focus on Roommates, Single, Blue, and Forgive Us Our Trespasses. They all seem to have one thing in common, and that is
that they are about the experience of living with a disability in some way or another. Yeah. They all, someone was like, it's all kind of about the survival in different ways of like surviving high school and surviving, like literally surviving Nazis, surviving dating. I'm like, it's just all these disabled stories about life, and I like going back and forth between really serious films and then films that have a little bit more of a light touch to it. Like my film Single is more in the dark comedy space. I call it an anti-rom-com, and it kind of has a bold character who, we don't normally see. And then I make Forgive Us Our Trespasses, which is like very a heavy, very war drama, thriller type movie. And then after that I made Roommates, which is about two college girls like going to a frat party and getting really drunk. So it's like they're all over the place in tone, but I just like showing like the diversity of our world and disability.
Do you feel that the lack of disability people in film and video has stunted your growth in terms of feeling empowered about your disability when you were growing up?
Oh yeah, I definitely think the lack of content out there made me retreat and feel very alone in my experience, and that I didn't belong anywhere because I was never seen anywhere. Like I, growing up, didn't know if I would be in a relationship. I didn't know if I would go to college. I didn't know if I would get married. I didn't know if I'd have a job. Because I saw no one who had a different type of body anywhere. And I was like, we are all supposed to hide. And I mean, it's interesting learning about the history of disability. And like with this Action T4, it's like eugenics were not only a thing in Europe, they were a thing in the United States. So it's like this idea of disability being bad or negative has been like passed along generation and generation. And so those ideas get infused to culture, and I used to feel like a bad person. I was like, I don't want anything to do with disability, even though like I had a disability. But then you realize it's because it's such a negative, touchy, weird subject that nobody wanted to address or talk about. It was like this thing you put over there. And at least for like, culture, it felt that way. And, it's when you learn about that history, like my mom wouldn't even use the word disabled. She would be like, I don't consider you disabled, like you're good. And I'm like, okay, so if I'm good, being not disabled, does that mean I'm bad if I am disabled? So like I was very much like, I'm not disabled. And it was also such a narrow definition of disability. That's why I didn't feel like I fit within it, where now we're really opening up the definition of disability. And it's like allowing different types of people to be involved in that definition, you know, and it's making it, oh, like, it's not just someone who uses, you know, a disability parking space, you know, sticker. It's like, it's not just a person who's a wheelchair user. It's like so many different types of groups have disabilities. And it's like, that is, I think, what has made me feel like wanting to explore this community more and join it and like get to know different types of people, and meeting people who have similar experiences as me was like life changing. I mean, I met a bunch of women who have upper arm like limb differences, and that was like their experience of being able to like kind of hide it and then not hide it, and people notice and then people don't, felt so similar to my experience. And like I would look at them and I'd be like, you're so amazing and dope, and like who cares about this thing, you know? And then I'd be like, wow, damn, like maybe I should feel that way about myself, you know? And it kind of was that like reflection of maybe that's how people see me instead of this really negative way that I've been thinking.
It just seems like you're used to be insecure about your hand, but when you're in the filming world, you use your hands a lot, so like you kind of forced to be in an uncomfortable situation for long times.
Right.
And I think for like most disabilities, like at first everyone gotta know it. I think that's just a given, but after a while, it's just like, does it inhibit your like how to film? Maybe it does for you a little bit, but like I don't think that you're still able to talk. They're able, like now that you have all this great video, so like your work is obviously amazing. That your disability shouldn't even be I guess a disability. Like it doesn't limit you what you can do.
Yeah. And I mean, I view disability as like, it doesn't, you know, and there's a lot of things that I can't do. I have a hard time opening bottles. I have a hard time holding a camera for,
Well,
a
you're
long
married
time.
now, so
Like,
you're good now.
yeah, he opens everything and holds all the cameras. But, you know, I, for a long time, it was like, that's the amazing thing about directing too, is like you have collaborators who do that stuff, you know? And I mean, we work on films where there's diva actresses who demand like the most ridiculous, absurd things. If I just need someone to help me open a water bottle, it'll be okay, you know? And that's why I love telling stories about disability, because I go, there are like access and needs that are only going to benefit everyone. You know, if something happens or someone is feeling uncomfortable, or maybe they have an invisible disability that we don't know about, if I'm making it a priority to show that I need certain things, or that the room is open for those things to be asked about or requested, then that's just making the set more safe for everyone. And, you know, I directed something recently, a TV show, and they had a accessibility coordinator on there, and her name is Kaya Amara, and she created this role. She has a disability, and she created this role to be on sets where there are projects about disability, which I just think they should exist on every, you know, set, because we should just start including and infusing disabled people. But she was the main point person if anyone needed to talk about anything or request anything. And like the most amazing thing is she can talk to crew who is like, doesn't know how to approach the person with a disability. Like, can I ask them to do this? Do they have the capacity to do this task? Like, they can come to her and ask that openly instead of just assuming that they can't. You know, like that is something that's so valuable, of having someone to speak to that is like an advocate for both sides. You know, it's kind of like almost like a mediator. It feels.
What is the name of the person? I never heard of this before.
It's Kaya. It's Kiah.
Oh no, not the person name, but like
the
position.
role.
Yeah.
It's an accessibility coordinator.
Huh.
Yeah, and it's like,
I didn't know that it existed at all.
yeah, she actually created the role, and it's like a new thing that she is like pitching to studios, that like we should do this to infuse people, so sets and productions aren't worried about disabled people being on set. It's like a really cool, amazing kind of thing, because that's the biggest issue, is like accessibility on a set. I mean, so many sets are like not even safe for non-disabled people. It's like there's wires everywhere. Like I've fallen on set probably more times than I can count.
Oh no.
And it's like not good because I try and just be like, oh, it's not a big deal, you know. And I'm pretty like prone to falling sometimes because I'm A, kind of clumsy, B, like my disability. I've had like so many surgeries on my legs that I think sometimes they're just not working properly. But you know, I mean, luckily in those situations, I've been fully like taken care of, and they hook me up with a doctor and all this stuff. You know, it's I'm way more careful on set now instead of like just running around and pretending like, you know, I can do everything and like take on all these tasks where it's like I'm now in the director, you know, I'm not a production assistant. I'm not the lower level of the tier of trying to just like get by and not have anyone complain about me, you know. And so now I'm in this position where it can, you know, I can request access, which then allows access for the lower tier of you know, production assistants. And like safety on set needs to be like one of the biggest priorities because it's not. And there's a lot of bad things that have happened on sets, you know, and especially with people getting even killed in our industry because sets aren't being safe. And so, you know, catering towards people with disability only makes it that much more safe.
Are you saying that the person that's hired to do accessibility, are they there because you're there, or is it more of a default kind of staff member?
Well, the show I directed on has a disabled lead. So, and they hired crew that all was disabled. So, like, it wasn't just me. It was like, it's the set and the show had to do with disability. So, like, that person was already there and staffed before I even came. Because, like, I only directed 2 episodes out of, like, an 8-episode show. So, I came in the middle and that was already established. I'd never even heard of this job or this role, but I'm like, now if I make features and I am in charge of, you know, everything, where TV shows it's a little bit different, but I'm like, I would hire this person because I'm like, that is an amazing person to have as an ally, where like as a director you have so many things you have to focus on, and it's like, you know, production design, script, actors, casting, there's like just so many elements that to have someone who has a disability who can be an ally for other people is like so important.
I'm just blown away a position like that existed, and then I'm also blown away that you didn't really do anything to cause that. They would just happen to have, they
Yeah.
happen to hire someone, and you just showed
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, there's a lot of amazing people like fighting for what I'm fighting for, you know, and they are creating these roles or, you know, demanding more authenticity. And I mean, there's a ton of people who have came before us. Like, there's actually a Forbes article that came out this morning that Keely Cat Wells, who she runs a talent agency of disabled talent, C Talent, she wrote this article for Forbes about all the, you know, people who have come before us. Like, we're all, you know, younger and fighting for inclusion, but it's like there have been people who have been fighting for inclusion for like 40 years, you know, and it's just finally somehow people are listening. And she was just kind of calling back to like, we can't forget about those people who kind of laid the runway for us to take off, which I think is like really important.
It seems very progressive for me because I feel like like we're just talking about like there's not that many disability people in like the film world, but then you talk about this position and it's like it seems so progressive for me. That I'm a little blown away by it.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, this is so cool. Because I kind of was like, you know, we met and I was like, what exactly do you do? Like, and I knew her before. So we had like, you know, she came into my office at the time and was like, do you have anything, you know, just wanted to chat about what I'm doing and you know, any thoughts. And I was able to like ask her questions too, you know, and that is really great because I have a disability, but I'm not an expert on all disabilities. You know, we have people with Down syndrome who are hired. We have people with different access and different needs and different, you know, issues that were happening and people maybe ignoring them or, you know, it's like it was good for me to be able to talk to her about it. And she's like the one who knows everything. And also people come and talk to her in confidence, which is really good. You know, they're like, I don't want everyone to know that this is my invisible disability, but I may need this, or I may, you know, there's people with autism where like we had a sensory deprivation room where people could go during their lunch break and like sit if they needed to, do that. And that's like really amazing.
I'm going to do a bold take on you that I know you talked about how you've been wanting disability people growing up, but my bold take is that the lack of disability people in your life lit a fire up your ass to want to do filming and such, and now you became this badass person, so now you're really into it because now you're really confident with yourself. I think directing in itself makes you that you have to be, if you want people to respect you, you have to know who you are, and
Right.
and it's like a double win that if you're confident with your disability, then the skill set transfer to your directing, and that makes you confident, and then you get more respected as a director, and people are more willing to want to work with you, and
Yep.
such. I feel like it's bounced. So I'm gonna say the lack of disability people helped you so much to now want to keep raising the bar really high
Yeah.
because
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's really interesting how it, how sometimes that suffering that you experience can be turned into like your biggest superpower, which that's for everyone who experienced suffering. I mean, I'm a huge one that like suffering in life is necessary, and what you're going to get handed, you just don't know. And, I mean, my disability brings me a lot of stress and a lot of pain, and my disability is degenerative, where like I don't know what I'm going to be facing in the future, and there's things that come up and tumors that are growing in very not good places, and like you're just like, I don't love having this disability, and that's like an okay stance to take, where I love what it has brought into my life and the community and the people I've met, and like the connection you have over this, like your body being affected differently than the rest of the world is like beautiful and amazing. And it's pushed me to be like even a better filmmaker, because I'm like, so often people with disability, people make these films that aren't good, and then they clap and they're like, they did such an amazing job and you get an award, like even when they weren't good. And I'm like, I don't want to be that. I don't want it to be like they gave me this because they feel like they should. I want to earn it because I'm actually have some type of talent or skill, and I can be compared to the other filmmakers that are doing good work, in my field and stuff. So that's how we become commercial and big and like taken seriously, is having the same, standards for our work that other people do. And I mean, budget is a huge thing that can help that. If you're working with your own resources, like it's hard to get there. But once you do have the resources, like really having a standard that you're building up towards.
your standards are very, very, very high, and compared to me, I'm like a baby. So
Well, I mean, I'm also like pretty old, so.
no, you're
And
only like I think 30. What 3?
I'm 35. I just turned 35 like 2 days
Uh,
ago, or not 2 days ago, 2 weeks ago.
I mean, it's still pretty young. Like I'm
Yeah.
about to turn 30, so like
Yeah,
you're
but
at, like compared to you, you would be like 5 years already in your career, where I'm
yeah.
just starting.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even make a short. So Blue, I didn't even make Blue until I was 31. And that was my first kind of short that had like production value, like looks legit, and has a standard that I was trying to meet. So, yeah, I didn't make that until
Oh,
31.
like
And then I
you mentioned
just,
before that you wanted to be at the same level everybody else, and not just, oh, I'm a disability filmmaker or I'm a women filmmaker, that I can compete with these guys. So I want to go to, so when you were sitting in the writer's room in the beginning, were you pitching disabled inclusivity, or it just wasn't an option just because you were low on the totem pole and just went with the flow?
yeah, I mean, when I worked in a writer's office it was a show, it was a medical drama called The Night Shift on NBC. And it's funny because I was literally almost bottom of the totem pole. I would get everyone's lunch. I would get the groceries. I would print
No,
copies of
no.
scripts. I would do all these things. I had zero input in the writer's room. I had zero really interaction besides handing off people their lunch. But I met so many people that like, that made my connection. Even I met the person for the Netflix connection at that job. So 10 years later, that all came back around, and like, you know, that's how I ended up getting this Netflix short, is because he put my name up, you know, and that is amazing to me, that like I know his lunch order to this day of what he likes to get, you know.
You should like buy it for him like one day, like thank you.
I know, I've been trying to send him like a bottle of whiskey or something, but he's, you know, we're gonna grab dinner, and he has a new wife, and
No,
yeah, but
no, it's huge, and yeah, I get it. Just I think a lot of people think, oh, like you got lucky, but I read it before. You didn't get lucky. You really worked your way up. Like you really
Yeah.
did the shittiest job you could do, and you.
And before that, I mean, I was working for America's Next Top Model. I was the assistant to like one of the top guys who like created the show with Tyra Banks, and like people were getting me lunch. And then when I wanted to actually get into scripted, this other opportunity came up, but it was also almost a demotion from what I was doing. And so I was like, should I take it? And I did, because like I just needed to get into the scripted world. And sometimes you should take any job you can find and just do it. You know, if it's terrible, you can always quit. You can always be like, well, that sucked, I'm going to move on to something else, you know. But while you're there, you meet those people, you make friends, you be helpful, because any one of those people can be either a recommendation for you later, or can be, you know, it's like it can really be anything. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I didn't even start thinking about disability until later on in my life.
Did your disability ever hold you back? Because it seemed like all these great opportunities, but do you ever have a lot of failure, possibly due to your disability? Do you think?
Due to my disability?
Yeah, like they obviously won't tell you like we're not gonna hire you because you're
Oh, yeah.
disabled, but
Yeah, I've interviewed a lot. I mean, when I was first trying to get my job, I interviewed a ton of places, and you know, then you have a personal connection. That's how I end up getting even top models. Like my grandma knew her friend's daughter worked at top. Like it was some crazy connection that was really cool to see come to fruition. But I've interviewed a ton. I mean, especially when I was trying to find a director's assistant job, they loved me on paper. I'd have the first interview and it'd go so good, and then sometimes I'd even get the second interview and then wouldn't get it. And John Chu, like I was interviewing to try and get a director's assistant job for five months before I landed that one. And when I went in to interview with him, it was just a really good connection, and we had, you know, a good vibe. And then he called me back for a second interview, and I was supposed to read the book Crazy Rich Asians and tell him how I'd make it into a movie, because he hadn't made the movie yet. And so he was like, I want to see if someone can bring something to the table. And it was just, you know, I prepped really hard for the meeting. I ended up landing it. And he's like a really interesting person where he likes unique and different things. Like he likes a person who has that like thing, you know, or he likes that project that has that unique, different perspective. And I think my disability might have even played into a strength. And at that point in my life, I was confident of talking about it in interviews. I wasn't confident with showing it on social media yet, but I was really confident in interviews being like, I have a disability, you know, maybe every so often I'll have a surgery.
do you do like jazz hands all the times?
Yeah. But I, you know, I was like, I am really smart. I work hard, you know, like all these things to basically try and make up for my disability. It felt like at times, but I owned it. And I think that was interesting as well. And, you know, other people who've hired me in the past, I think they're like, oh, this is interesting. She's vulnerable, but strong, you know, and that's why they end up going with me. But I definitely think I didn't get a lot of interviews because people, you know, they felt uncomfortable and they underestimated me, you know. And there's been times too where I won't name specific projects, but I feel like I got hired on paper, had like a phone interview, and then when I come in person, they're like, oh, this is who we hired. I did not know this. And it's kind of like that funny thing, you know, which I've experienced a lot in dating as well, where I initially did not, you know, show my disability. I said I have a rare bone disease, but like, what does that actually mean? And people could be like, oh, that just means like her bones are different on the inside, you know, and they don't realize like what it actually looks like. And so that was a whole interesting trajectory that I'm actually writing a TV show about. So
I always say that some people agree with me, but some people don't. I feel like having disability almost gives you extra motivation to be better than, because we know that we're not as valued as a regular person. So we're extra motivated and we set the bar much higher for ourselves to stand out more. And I feel like that gives us an edge to be better than a regular able-bodied person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are in a world that's not really made for us. And so we're always adapting. We're like, always thinking about things in a different way. And I think that's why I think the community is so cool and interesting, is because we're all these like unique people.
No, we're all like extremely motivated. You know, we have to stand for ourselves in public and even hospitals too. It's like, but the skill can be transferred to everywhere, and it creates this amazing people, a set of people. And it's like we're such badasses.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
So, was your ultimate dream was to create films featuring disabled people?
My ultimate dream was not that when I first got into the industry. My dream was like, my favorite movie I watched when I was a teenager, and people think I'm disturbed, is Requiem for a Dream. Because I had these preconceived notions about drug addicts. And I watched that film and it completely changed my mind. I had empathy for a community I didn't know. And it was also like so artistically done. That was what made me really want to get into films and storytelling. And I, initially think I wanted to tell a lot of gritty stories, which I still do. But, my first short, I was like, I'm going to try and find disabled people to be in this short. But I was having a hard time finding people. And, there's a lot of disabled actors out there, but sometimes there's not the right person for the right role. And so what I've been doing a lot is finding the person, then writing something around them. And I'm realizing that works really well. But, it's not, I'm going to be honest, not everyone can act, and I think like that is something that can be hard when you're trying to cast a specific role in a specific thing. And if the acting isn't great, then your project isn't great. And there are definitely people out there who have disabilities who can act and are very talented, and there's a big group of them. But when you are casting something and you're writing a film, usually your group you're picking from is like thousands and thousands and thousands of people, where like I don't think we have the same group that can act and knows the skill of disabled people. And that's initially what people think and why they would cast people as non-disabled. And now,
I want to know, what is your opinion on actors acting to have a disability versus hiring a disability person?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to at some point stop, like hiring non-disabled actors, because I get that acting is a skill. I used to have a different opinion on it that has shifted. So I used to be like, you need actors who can act, and not all disabled people can act, and there'd be a lot of people who would be like, I'm here, I have this disability, I can act. And sometimes they can't. And that is something that not a lot of people want to talk about. And I am not afraid to talk about it, because actors have incredible skill that is very hard to do. And I admire actors, and like not enough people give actors that credit. But there are a lot of people out there who have natural talent who don't even know that they can act, because their disability and the way that we show actors on screen, non-disabled actors playing disabled people, they never thought this could even be a path for them. So we at some point have to say no more. We're not going to make this film until we find the right person. If that's in 10 years, if that's in 20 years, so be it. And what was happening is people would get these films together, and they get the budget and they get the big person, and they'd be like, all right, it's time to go. We're not going to make the film otherwise. And I'm like, well, then you should just wait until you find that actor and they come along, because film is forever. And what happens when you cast somebody who's non-disabled and then they go up and they win an award and they don't have that disability, we become a myth. We aren't human. We aren't real things that are happening in this world. We become this like story. And people go, phew, wow, I'm so happy they don't actually have to live that life that we saw that person struggle through. And that is like a problem. And that is where I'm like, and I think it takes away the opportunity from someone who has a disability of ever getting that role, because that might be one of the only few that they could ever get in that, for that specific disability. And I think, I mean, I know like acting is, I know the other side of this coin is like acting, you're supposed to act like a person, you're supposed to transform, but it's like if that person can't do any other role except for that, and then an able-bodied person comes and does it, they're taking a job away from someone. And like I said, they're not making our stories real and humanizing these people who actually live with these disabilities. So I used to be a little bit more on the side of like, well, if they can't find the actor, then they should still make the movie, and like then if you can't find someone, then go ahead and still make it. But I'm like, I don't think it's serving us anymore. And I think we have to say no. So productions and studios go, okay, we're going to do a deeper dive. We're going to spend 6 more months. All the people that I've been casting, I find off Instagram, and I like do reads with them, and I see if there is some natural talent or ability there, and then go from there. Some people, it is harder. It is way harder to film something with an actor who knows nothing or has no skill than a person who is really talented and has years of experience. But they have to start somewhere. It's like you have to have some day where people say no more. We're going to be pissed if you do it. And I think that's where we're at. And I think it's like a really cool place because studios will take a chance on someone new. And it's like Hollywood loves disabled stories. They win so many Oscars, and it's like if we can find those people who have these disabilities, I mean, it gets really tricky. It gets complicated, and there's no doubt that like there is a gray line because about if it's someone who has a disability and heals, or someone who has a disability and then doesn't have the disability and then it degenerates, that can be really tricky of how you're casting that person. But I think it needs to be really carefully like approached. But I'm a very like nuance is everything, and like there's gray areas to so much of life that this can be gray, and it's like, does someone have to have the exact same disability that the person that is doing it had, or does it have to look similar on screen? That's where I'm like, I don't know the answer to that exactly, but I think we get into a dangerous place with storytelling when we're like, only that person can do that and tell that story, and then it's like a documentary, and you're like, wait a second, this is like taking away the art of something. But I absolutely think like non-disabled people should not play disabled people, and like it usually ends up being a trope. It usually ends up being problematic. It usually offends the community. There's a lot of things that happen when disabled people aren't infused into the whole process, and that's like what a lot of people are pushing for, is like you get authenticity by infusing disabled people.
I think
that's my hot take.
Yeah, it's a very conflicting answer because I did want to get your opinion just because you're really in the field. Like I think one of the challenges you talked about is really the pool. The pool is extremely small to hire them, and you see like you have to talk to people and see if they're good at acting, and then create this thing is like, if I'm disabled, like why should I go in the filming world where there are no jobs for me? So it's like, why should I spend all this time and money if I can't get a job? It's just not worth it. And then it's just challenging. Like to me, like when I see a disability actor, if they're fake or not, it doesn't make a difference to me at all. Like I never needed that authenticity. It's like if they do, I guess, a good job of it, like in a wheelchair or such, then that's fine. But I also agree with film. It's not always. It can't always be as realistic as it can be. Like one example is like I'm watching a show called Friday Night Lights, and a guy become a quadriplegic, and then he's like back in a chair doing sports in 6 months, and like impossible. But due to filming and like you can't wait 6 years. You gotta like change things up. So it's hard to be authentic and very realistic, but also live in a realm of filming that it gets really challenging.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's a tricky world to balance, but I do think those people are out there, and like it's just a matter of finding them and giving it the proper resources, and people who've never even considered it. You know what I mean? For me, a lot of the time I was really uncomfortable in front of the camera, and so that's like really interesting when it's like now I'm like, what if I wasn't uncomfortable in front of the camera growing up? Would I maybe want to pursue acting? Would I have been better in not feeling like everyone's looking at me and nervous, and that's something with especially physical disability is like a lot of people had those insecurities growing up, and like you really have to shed that. You have to like pretend a camera's not there, and that can be hard, but we have to like try and start somewhere and give people the opportunity to even get there and grow and develop themselves as an actor. It's not like every person who first gets on their very first movie is like amazing, but sometimes they can be. I mean, Knox had never acted before in Forgive Us Our Trespasses, and like there were times where it was tricky, but we got him there, and he nailed it. And there were certain things that he brought to it where I was like, wow, that look or what you did there with all those emotions happening in like one movement, I was like, amazing. So, but if we were just like, oh, why don't we just do a green screen arm and just pretend he's disabled? Like we could have got some huge young actor in there, but it would have never given the opportunity to Knox. And a lot of the time people are going, oh, well, he lives in Australia. We can't fly him out. It'll be too hard with COVID. Like, let's just go with this person. We know they're good, and it's scary as a director because like, your film is so much based on the acting. Like if you don't get good
it's
actors,
your whole reputation.
Yeah, so it's like it really is a scary leap sometimes, but I think we have to make it to start to get more people on screen and get those opportunities and find those people, because that's the biggest thing to me is like those people are out there, they just don't know yet. They never thought of themselves in this world. And maybe with more roles being seen, kids will grow up and go, oh, maybe I can do that, and then it'll create more actors for the future. It's like we just have to start building, this mafia of...
Can I be on one of your shows? Like I can play like a dead person or something?
A dead person?
Yeah, just line me up in chalk or something. I don't know.
Yeah, let's do it if you want to. I mean, I will.
Yeah, I want to get shot on camera. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, let's do it. I mean, that's what I want. I mean, I want to get as many like people in stuff as possible. I'm like, want to give the exposure, want to tell our stories, want our lives to be celebrated in a way that,
I can definitely help you get some people that have like lively to themselves that I think might be good in an acting role.
Yeah, always down for recommendations, because I'm, like Knox, I mean, I followed him on Instagram and had known of him for like 2 years, and then this opportunity came up and I was like, man, I've been wanting to do something with this kid, and it like inspires a story, I mean, every person, like I follow people on Instagram to be like, and I literally have a save tab of like disabled people to connect with, and that's where sometimes when I'm like, what project do I want to tell next? What do I want to do? I like go through that and I'm like, who's been interesting to me that I've been like kind of keeping an eye on, and like that is how I find so many of these people.
Yeah, thanks to Instagram, and I mean, it's
hashtags.
Like, that, and it's like cool to be a director, like control the content, how you want to present themselves. Like I'm editing and directing basically myself. And it's a lot of fun. Like I get why people don't go into it, because the money is shit for a long time and then it gets really good. They don't like middle gray area, but I get it. So it seems that all the work you do in the future will be disability based, or will you mix it up?
Yeah, I mean, we're writing on something that doesn't have a disability angle, but I add a disabled character, or I'm like, what if we cast that person? They are a wheelchair user. What if we cast this person and it's, someone with a limb difference, or, like there's so many different ways to infuse disability without it even having to really be about disability. Like right now, I want it to be about disability because I feel like we don't have those films yet. Like there's a lot of people who are like, oh, we want films that aren't about the disability, but I'm like, I want to see stuff that is about the disability and how it's affected their life, and learn about that. And, like a coming of age movie about someone with a disability, like I want all that stuff, and to know what is it like when you first kiss a guy, and what is it like when you do the, like I want to explore all those spaces. And I think there will be a point where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna, do this other thing over here. I mean, that's the fun about filmmaking, is like you can really just like mix it up.
You have an untapped market.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Just
it's a good. I say this thing where I'm like, it's never been a better time in history to be a female filmmaker and a filmmaker with a disability, because people want to hear it, and want to hear our stories, and I think that's a great place to be in, instead of like the people who came before us and the founding fathers of disability activism, and people weren't listening, and they had to live in decades of people not really caring, and I just hope we continue to live in a future where people start
I
to
always
care.
fight for that. It's not about having disability people in a film or something, but you also have to give them a good plot line too, because that's what
Yeah.
makes us care. Like it's
Yeah.
the same, like inviting a black person,
Yeah.
inviting a gay person. If they don't have a good plot to them and they're just there, it clearly looks shoehorned. If you give them a good plot and care, like, most people. It's just
Yeah,
that
it's
most
like,
people don't not like disability people. It's just that they have shitty plots and then no one cares.
yeah. I
Like,
mean, and it's every marginalized community. I mean, that's what working on Crazy Rich Asians did for me, is like, it exposed me to like, man, there so many films have these Asian tropes where it's like the nerdy Asian guy who's into math, or the really sexualized foreign woman from abroad that the guy has like his, sexual escapade with in some other country. And you're like, why is that always what it is for this community? And then I started looking at my own community, and I'm like, oh my God, like we're infantilized. Like we are always like very inspirational, overly inspirational, or people feel really bad for us, and it's like depressing, and like, people call really minimal things inspiring, of like, it's just the inspiration porn world is like so gross. And I'm like, man, I just want to do so much in the other direction of that, and disrupt the narrative of disability, and like show characters who are badass, show characters who have disabilities who are unlikable, not the villain, but like are human and unlikable, and just all these different things that I hadn't seen growing up, and trying to like make the world feel like this is a cool community to be a part of, and because it is. I love the people in this community.
it's how good are you with compliments?
I'm really bad with I feel very uncomfortable with compliments.
Oh well, we're gonna have a tough 2 minutes here. So,
All right.
just want to say that I've seen your short film. You are extremely skilled in writing, to the cinematography, to the set design, to the lighting is really superb. I know you have a whole staff helping you, but you are the brains behind the whole production. It's clear as day why you have won so many awards and recognized. I hope one day we can both have our own film, and I have a lot of catching up to do because your shit is top tier.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so nice.
So before I take the mic away from you, is there anything you want to say, promote? The mic is all yours.
No, I mean, I'm just like, if you want to be a filmmaker, like just go making films, start writing these stories. So much of the projects that I pursue are like a nugget of an idea, and then I write them in a journal, and then sometimes I don't revisit it for like 3 years. Even like my film, not really with Forgive Us Our Trespasses, but like with Single, with Roommates, with Blue. I mean, Blue started on like a receipt. I started writing down these thoughts about like connection and this blue scar and like all these different elements. And then it slowly turns into a film. And like the ideas I pursue are the ones that like I write down and I can't get out of my head. It's like you take a shower and you're like thinking about the plot, or you're walking and you think about the plot, and I think something else that I really notice is like, when you're doing things, try not to always fill your time with your phone. Like being able to have nothing to do and stand in line just thinking, or walking around just thinking, is really good for your creative brain. Where like, what I've realized is the more I'm standing in line looking at Instagram, looking at Facebook, looking at Twitter, those ideas aren't coming to me as much, and I think it's a really important thing to mention, of like, let your mind be bored so ideas can come to you.
That's pretty good words. So thank you, Ashley, for giving me your time. Thank you, everyone, for
Yeah.
giving me their time. All her description and link to her short films are down below. Please make longer films because, they're all so
I'm
short. Like,
trying.
I know, but they're so short. Like, I want to know more, like, especially the one
Yeah.
on Netflix. But I did want to ask, how did it feel to have your name, like, on a big screen that said directed by Ashley Eakins?
Yeah. Thank you. We're working on it.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone, for listening and watching, and I'll see everyone next time. Bye.
Bye.